All right. Well, welcome to the Voice with Action podcast. And I am here today with Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hello, I did.
So, Mike, he and his family sponsored Freedom Center number 4 for us. It's called the Christopher Freedom Center. And he has traveled now twice with Orphan Relief and Rescue to West Africa. And on this most recent trip, he was able to dedicate this center in memory of his son. So, I wanted to hear more about his story and how he got connected to Orphan Relief and Rescue and how the Lord really put it on his heart to sponsor this Freedom Center in memory of his son. So thanks, Mike, for joining me today. So my first question for you is, how did you get connected initially to Orphan Relief and Rescue?
Well, through our church, and they were first involved. I believe the pastor went over to West Africa about 15 years ago and was actually looking for an organization to get involved with. And he told me that he had met with 15, 18 different organizations and ultimately landed on Orphan Relief and Rescue and was very impressed with the work they were doing. And so it was 15 years ago or so.
Okay. And so what was your journey with, how did the Lord put it on your heart to, fund this Freedom Center, essentially? What was that process for you and your family?
Well, years ago, number one, I've been involved with children's ministry for a long time. I really have a heart for kids. Younger children, I always say when they become people, it's harder. I relate well to younger kids. I can tell them stories. I love their creative imaginations and so forth. When they become teenagers, my wife's much better. Um, I love younger children, and so through our church we sponsor a number of the children with ORR, and so I would always see their faces. And as far as the sponsorship, last year I went for the very first time, and I'd really actually never been on an organized mission trip. Years ago, it was a year after our son had passed away, in 2007, 1 year after he had died. We went to Peru and Ecuador, and we had sponsored children through Compassion International for a long time, and we just organized a trip to ourselves to visit a young girl that we had sponsored, and which was really cool because, half a world away, we go to this village in the Andes Mountains, and we see a poster of our son in this little hut, because she had found out he had died, and she had this poster made. It was really quite touching. But anyways, to go back to the Christopher's Freedom Center, I had gone last year, and seen the change that it causes in people's lives. The feeding programs, the improvement for not just children but families, allowing them to be able to make an income through like the savings and loan programs, etc. Really improving their lives. I was really touched by it, because I don't think a lot of people on this continent realize. I mean, we do have poverty here, but the most abject poverty that we have in North America is filthy rich
Mhm.
compared to the poverty that is over there.
Yeah.
There is no comparison. And um, we had been really fortunate just at the very time that we were making the trip over there last year. We had sold some land that where we had lived previously, and were real fortunate, and it had done really well. And it's real easy to spend. And as you get older, it's like, well, you gotta make sure and have a nest egg and take care of yourself. And then at the same time, I started thinking, this is this is not my money, and I'm getting to the point where I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around, and I need to have the right perspective on my money. And God's blessed me with the ability to make money, and it's not my money, it's His money, and I need to be a good steward of it. And I saw what this was doing, and our money here goes a long, long way over there. You say, yeah, what's $100 going to do over there? A lot. And so, I called my wife and I said, we could do some good by sponsoring one of these. What do you think?
So this is your first trip. You were in West Africa.
And I
You
called,
went to meet the children that this church sponsors through our safe home. You saw our
well,
anti-trafficking program, right, in action.
and
And
in one of the villages, seeing the freedom
yes, going to the village. Yeah.
and seeing what they do,
Hmm.
the dramatic good. I mean, it's life changing good. I mean, on one hand, if you just feed people, you're going to create nothing but dependence, lifelong dependence. That's not what they're doing. They're teaching people how to make a living. They're teaching them finance. They're teaching them farming. They're setting up programs for anti-trafficking. What do you do? How do you explain to a person over here? How do you tell a person when you come back to the States, yeah, people sell their children? They don't have a category for it. And they're able to prevent that by first meeting needs with people. You say, well, tell them to stop it. Well, you have to give them a means to stop it.
Hmm.
And you can't just tell them about Jesus.
Hmm.
And I don't mean to offend Christians, but as one of the interpreters said to me, I struck up a great relationship. We talk every week. We'll talk tomorrow, actually. You say, well, if they had Jesus in their life, that's going to make all the difference. No, it's not. He said to me, Papa Mike, an empty belly has no ears. You have to meet certain needs, and you've got to first feed them, then show them, give them the ability to make a living so that they can feed their families, so that they don't have to sell their children. And
Exactly.
then share the love of Christ with them to give them a way out of this darkness that they're into. And part of that is the structure and the things that a community center and the programs that it offers affords. So,
Yeah. So then you saw one of our freedom centers built and being utilized, and so you called your wife and said, "What? I feel like the Lord. I think we could do some good with the
yeah.
land that we just sold with the money." And
And she didn't, she just said, yeah,
Hmm.
do it.
And in memory of Christopher.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So tell me about Christopher. I'd love to hear about Christopher.
Yeah. Well, he was a sweet, sweet boy. Um, both of our children, we were never able to have biological children, and I'm not going to go into the whole story of how it happened, but both of our children are complete biological brother and sister, 14 months apart, and they look nothing like us. The blonde hair of Michelle, it's like they're built nothing like us, look nothing like us, but um, just wonderful kids. And Christopher became a Christian, I think probably around 5 or 6 years old. At 12 years old, 13 years old, he still was this kind, as a young teenager, he would openly show affection toward my wife in public. I remember once we went to this little local restaurant when we lived in Nebraska, and they had these things called pickle cards. You put money in a machine. It's like a vending machine, and you get out these cards and you peel them, and you might win. Not well. Normally, you win nothing, but you might win $10 or you know. Well, I'd never even done it before. I said, well, he. I suppose at the time he shouldn't have known division, but when it comes to money, you never know. But I said, whatever I win, bub, I'll give you half. And I won $100. And he said, give me my 50. And he took that $50 of his. And if I remember it right, he gave like 25 to the church, $15 to his sister, $5 to something else. He kept $5 for himself. And he was just a kind-hearted, lovely, lovely person. And one other, and this is about not so much about him. I had been at a, and this is about how God knows all things and prepares people for things. But I had been at a Wild at Heart retreat in 2004, and this speaker John Eldridge was talking about how it's so important that as fathers we need to prepare our young men for adulthood, and we need to show them and communicate to them that they have what it takes, and that it's critical as a dad that you share with your young man that he's the real deal. And and I thought about that after I got back, and I never did anything. And in March of 2006, he was asked to go on this church retreat, and my birthday was coming up, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I have this opportunity to go on this youth retreat." And he said, "But your birthday is coming up, and so I think I'm going to stay home." And I said, "No, honey, I want you to go. I want you to go." And I remember where we were standing. We were standing at the refrigerator, and I said, "Now's the time." And it was a Wednesday night, and I put his face in my hands, and I remember exactly what I said. I said, "Honey, I'm so proud of the godly young man that you've become, and I'm looking so forward to watching you become a man." And I said, "Someday you're going to make a woman a wonderful husband, and you are going to be a wonderful father." I said, "Honey, you have what it takes." And Deb, those are the last words I ever spoke to him. And I look, and some people look with great regret I wish I had done this, or I wish I had said that. And as a dad, I always wanted to be a father. I always told my children exactly what I thought of them. And I am so glad that I said that, but it was like, you know, I'm so glad that God put that on my heart to tell him that at that time, because God knew that he was going to be gone and I was never going to be able to say that to him again. And, uh, and I'm so grateful for that. And some people would say, well, well, why would a loving God do? Because he made a choice. He made a choice. He made a bad choice. He went on a skiing trip, and he and some older boys chose to go out of bounds. And unfortunately, there were terrible consequences that resulted from that. And he was the one who died. And uh, you know, um, and that's not because there's a hateful God. It's because there are consequences to making bad decisions. But about him, he was a wonderful, wonderful human being, and I am just so, so thankful that I got to be his dad. And looking at the Freedom Center, the Greek. Oh, well, let me back up a little bit again. The the daughter Michelle, we had our grief. She lost her very best friend. She was there on the youth retreat. Um, Devastated. I don't know. I lost a brother also, but I was older. I know what it's like, but I don't know what it's like as a young teenager to lose a sibling. Um, and and so she went from being a cheerful, excited, bubbly young girl to um, total darkness, and it was a long, long journey, uh, uh, long journey for her, and um, several really hard years. And fast forward to things did become easier over time, and there was healing. But when we decided to go to Africa after the Freedom Center was built, I invited her to come, and then earlier this year we had um, adopted um, a girl who's a little older than Michelle, who was there. We kind of fostered her in high school, and she was a great help around the time that Christopher died, and we had a close relationship with her for quite a long time. And it took 20 years, but she became our daughter earlier this year, and I wanted her to go on this too. And as Michelle has become a woman, she's 32 years old now. Um, I just thought this would be a really great experience for her to see this Freedom Center dedicated, and for our newly adopted daughter Rose, who's like a big sister to Michelle, for her to be there. And I think you're going to be interviewing Michelle, and so you'll get to hear that story. But it was a really healing thing for her soul, and I just saw a new side of her and a wonderful side come out. And um, and when she first saw it, uh, she she started to sob, and but it was good. It was. She put her hand on the building and cried, and but but God has used it in a wonderful way, truly a wonderful way. Yeah.
I know that It's very, the whole thing is so powerful. What was your journey of also forgiveness towards the other boys that, their idea to go down a ski route that was closed and dangerous? And
Well,
do you feel comfortable sharing that story of
well,
forgiveness?
yeah, yeah. Well, in initially, the two boys, they ended up coming over to our house when they got back from Colorado. All of the kids at the youth retreat, we addressed all of them the next morning, and just imagine a whole group of 40 stunned teenagers who have never faced death before. Just kind of picture what that's like.
Mhm.
And and then having some counselors come in and tell them to, go plant a tree or something. Um, and it was tough. It was really tough. And um, but then we had to face the two boys when they came back, and thankfully, my wife and I have both been Christians for a long time, and we've both done lots of wrong things. We both needed forgiveness from others for lots of things, and neither one of us. Uh, we knew that they did something really stupid, but we also knew that we could destroy them with the wrong word, and so neither of us felt contempt or anything toward them. And what they needed to know was that we forgave them. And so the first thing that we asked, we said, we asked them both, "Are you Christians?" Because and I think we knew the answer, and um, they both said, "Yes, we are." And I said, in Philippians 1:6, it says, "He who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ." And so that means that Jesus Christ himself knew that you would be on that mountain that day, and that long before you were ever born, he knew that you would sin, and that you're actually going to continue to sin throughout your life, but that he's going to work with you and through you to accomplish his purposes. And if he can forgive me, I can forgive you, and I forgive you. And years later, one of the other boys, one of the boys, man, now is an elder in our church that we went to back then, and we have we don't see him that often. We don't see him and his family that often, but when they pass through here, they stay with us, and we have a close relationship with them. One of the other guys, number of years ago, came by and he was like, "What can I do? What can I do? Like, I can't undo the past." And we said, I'm not going to use their names, but we said, "Listen, you're off the hook. We forgive you. It was a mistake. You made a stupid mistake, but we know that you didn't intend it. We forgive you, you know, um, and, no sin's bigger than any other sin." People like to make hierarchies, but we know that they didn't intend.
Hmm.
But, and so I just viewed it, um, and the vengeful feelings. Thankfully, they never arose in either one of us, and I don't really feel like there would have been a place for it, anyways. And it would not have served any kind of purpose other than to devour us. But they're really, honestly, were never feelings, but compassion towards those guys, because we wanted them to grow up. I mean, I look at the one guy, he is such an excellent father and an excellent husband, you know. And his wife said to us in a text once, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, because if you had not forgiven him, it would have destroyed him." And I just realized, you know, it's not all on me or on my wife. It's like, well, what would I be like if Christ hadn't forgiven me?
Yeah.
I've done a lot of wrong things, you know. So, anyways.
Yeah, it is. I mean, words can't even describe the power of when you've been forgiven, you know, your ability to be able to extend forgiveness to someone else and freeing them. I mean, that's the hope that we have in Jesus. And and so have these young men or adults now, have they been able to see the Christopher Freedom Center? Have you been able to share with them?
No, one of them, one of them I stay in touch with, and he knows about it. The other, I have not been able to. We connected once about a year and a half ago. He's had a rough time in life, but a lot of it's still being self-induced.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Not,
still on a journey. He's still
yeah,
on his journey.
yeah, you know, and
Yeah.
we wish, honestly, we wish the best for him.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, so I mean, obviously, we believe that God is a God of redemption, and He is a God of detail that brings. So here you have going back to being able to visit the Christopher Freedom Center, see it in person, dedicate it. How was that for your heart? And I know I'll get to talk to Michelle, and but you're there with Michelle, you're there with Rose, and just this moment of your son that had such life and such generosity, such a heart of generosity, and then actually seeing with your eyes how this building, it's more than just a building, you know, it's literally bringing life and it's facilitating life, both physically life, you know, food and our programs, but then also eternal. You know, there's this message that this same hope that you have in your life is being shown and taught out of this facility to the community. So I was just, how was that for your heart?
Well, okay, it was good, and then the guy part of me takes over, and it's like, okay, now what do we need to do? And well, an interesting thing happened. Also on the trip was Michelle's boyfriend, and he makes this comment. Um, by the way, I'm level one trauma certified, whatever that means. And I'm like, thinking to myself, well, why did you share that? Well, turns out for a very good reason. I mean, it irritated me at first because there's no reason for that unless somebody, I suppose, unless we need to do CPR. But so we're at that. That's the very first place we were on Saturday, because it was on Saturday it's open to the whole village, because there's a feeding program during the week, but on Saturday it's open to everyone. And so there were, I don't know, 350 people there or something like that. And interestingly, you know, on Sunday, you know, if you go to church, and a lot of churches will say, if you have any prayer requests or prayer needs, come up front. We have a prayer team on the left or on the right, and sometimes 2 or 3 people come up, right? If maybe that's you've got it at your church. We do at our church, and so sometimes 2 or 3 people will come up. And well, at the Freedom Center, as they're preparing food, there's a message, or we introduced ourselves, and then they said, it's going to be a little bit of time until the food's ready, So what we're going to do is we're going to break our group. There were 12 of us. We're going to break our group up into teams of 2, and of course we needed 6 interpreters. We're going to have anybody who needs prayer, you can come up. Well, we've got like 225 people. Everybody wants prayer. Well, people want prayer for their stomach, for their ailments. One woman says, "Please pray for me so I don't have to sell my children." She has 5 kids with her. Then a kid comes up and please pray for this sore on my leg. And of course we prayed for it, but it really looked bad, really bad. And afterward, I said to Ben, my daughter's boyfriend, remembering he's level 1 trauma certified, whatever that means, "Ben, could you look?" Well, he has his kit with him. "Ben, could you look at this?" Well, it turns out 15, 20 minutes later, he's got a line of 15 people behind him. He's all out of medical supplies. And he says, if these two don't go to the hospital, they'll be dead within a week. It'll be gangrenous. And I say all that to, this is how God does interesting things. It got me thinking, these people have no access to medical care at all. So a splinter either walls itself off or expels itself, or it turns into staph and you die. And you think, well, why don't they just go to the doctor? Because there isn't a doctor. Little boy asked for prayer for his ear as the pus was coming out of both ears. And so I'm like, okay. I talked to the director. How much would it cost to bring a doctor and a nurse in once a month with supplies for a year? That's about $12,000. And I'm saying this to, people that are watching the podcast. So for $12,000, we can treat most of the village with medical supplies and a doctor and a nurse once a month for a year. And that could deworm the people. That could probably save 10 or 15 lives, because there is not a family in that village that we were in that doesn't have a dead member of the family. Well, maybe there are 1 or 2, but I didn't talk to one that didn't have a dead husband, dead mother, dead brother, dead sister. They all die, and they die at young ages. And so I walked away. So that immediately, as soon as I got back to the States, it was like, okay, I'm 3/4 of the way there, raising the money at Christopher's community center. And I kind of want to do that as a beta site to work out the kinks, because maybe that can be used, because up front it's going to be expensive, because everybody's going to have problems, but maybe after 6 or 7 months, it'll ease off. But it's going to end up, and this is a guarantee, it's going to end up saving at least 7, 8, 10, 12 lives, because the 2 boys would have been dead within a week. And so, that's one of the ways God did show up. That little statement that he made, and if he hadn't made it, I wouldn't have thought of it. Mm-hmm. And, so.
Wow, cool. That's so inspiring and encouraging, because, going there, dedicating the property, and then the Lord putting on your heart ideas of, well, what's next? How can this continue to save more lives? And so if there's anyone out there listening that would like to help towards these medical efforts, you can visit orphanreliefandrescue.org and make a donation. A monthly recurring donation would help this every single month. And so thank you for kind of giving that charge, of an idea of something tangible that people can be a part of. And Mike, I just really appreciate you sharing your heart and your journey and where we are today. It's just very inspiring, and I really hope it encourages someone out there, especially if they're in their grief process or questioning, can they trust that God is still a God of love when there's so much suffering and pain and unexpected pain, and that we do have hope, and that he is a God of redemption, and he does unexpected things, so many details that blows our mind how.
Well, one other thing you do see when people wake up, when people have had some of their needs met, and that it's cool in this country, like voodoo potato chips and voodoo t-shirts, and the religion is it's a dark religion that is a soul killer. And when you look at people's eyes, you can really see a lot. And if you've ever looked at a dead fish and you look at somebody that's deep into that religion, the eyes of the fish and the eyes of that person, they're one and the same. And then you see, these people that sacrifice. People think nobody sacrifices children anymore. Yes, they do. And it happens all the time. And you think, well, how could they sell a child? When you sacrifice your first child, you learn not to bond with any of your other children. But then once they experience the love of Christ, all of a sudden they're wanting their other children to be dedicated, to be blessed. And you see them wake up, and you see a dramatic change, and you see light and life in their eyes. And that's what keeps me wanting to go back. Because yes, it's painful, but the contrast between light and darkness is profound. And it's worth going just for that.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And well, I'm thankful for the light that shines bright within you and your family. And thank you for your time today. We'll make sure we get you on here next time you travel and next time you go to hear more about how the Lord's inspiring you and is shining his light bright through you. So thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Voice with Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you consider sharing or subscribing to this podcast and leave a 5-star review to help us grow? If you want to reach us or help us end child trafficking in West Africa, go to Orphan Relief and Rescue.org. That's Orphan Relief and Rescue.org. See you next week.